Looking to you for that. Okay, good. We all good, Heidi? All right, thanks. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate. Welcome to Discovery Wednesday with Guy Finley. We are broadcasting live from the Life of Learning Foundation here in Merlin, Oregon. So hello to all of you in the room, and hello to all of you. Hopefully there are some of you online there. For those of you who've joined us tonight, we usually broadcast live to GoToWebinar, Facebook, and YouTube, but there seems to be a problem with GoToWebinar tonight, so we weren't able to get logged in and do our usual live streaming from there. So hopefully everyone got the message I sent out and you've joined us on either Facebook or YouTube. We'll continue with the broadcast per the normal from those two places. If you have any tech issues, for those of you online, you can still reach out to us, like in the chat box, that's there on Facebook or YouTube, or you can email me at support@guyfinley.org. In just a moment, Guy is going to come on and give an hour-long talk, and during the talk, he'll do what we call the discovery portion of class, which is when he engages with the audience to get us involved in what he's talking to us about. And if you're online, you can still participate by just sending your notes in the chat area, like I said, in not in GoToWebinar, in YouTube or Facebook, and I'll find those as I can and pass them on to Guy. I already asked you guys, but I'll say it again. If you have a cell phone, please go ahead and check it now and make sure that it's turned off. We'll have an hour-long, Guy will talk for an hour. We'll take a short break per the normal, and then we'll come back for part 2 of class, which will be an open Q&A and discussion time with everyone. So the usual schedule will run for 90 minutes tonight. Did you want me to read the key lesson tonight? Okay. All right. All right, so we're ready to get started. I'll just go ahead and read the title and the key lesson. Our topic for tonight is transform any weakness into true spiritual strength. Here's the key lesson. Much as a stalking tiger uses woodland shadows to hide its intention from its intended prey, so does our weakness hide behind the momentary strength of any negative reaction we become identified with, even as it consumes us.
Am I waiting for a checkered flag or anything? Go. Apparently we're having some technical difficulties this evening. And we're also attempting to live stream on Instagram at the same time, a live event. So there's a lot of unknowns going on here, and there's no telling exactly what will happen as we go through this. But one thing is for sure, those of you who have made it online, or for that matter, who are catching this talk, should it be rebroadcast, and I don't even know if that's possible anymore. It is? Good. Let me welcome you and everyone in the room. I have a rather simple intention this evening, but sometimes the simplest things are the most difficult to see, and that won't be any exception this evening. So I'm going to move in and out of a certain line of thinking, a certain line of thought, that in all honesty, it's going to require you paying a little more attention than usual, because in order to connect all of the dots that I hope to, and connect the dots for the single purpose. Do you remember they don't even have coloring books anymore, but you remember Connect the Dots? And you never quite knew what it was going to be. Who would have thought that all those dots could be a giraffe? That would have never occurred to me. But when they were all finally put together, you could see the outline of something. And that's what I want to do this evening, is help you see the outline of something that is factually invisible to you now as you are. The reason for these meetings, for the classes, for this foundation, isn't, as I said on Sunday, to provide you with answers by which you go out and then try to prove you know something. but rather to stimulate you into asking yourself questions that you presently don't ask yourself, because most of us are so sure and self-assured with our answers that it never dawns on us, in spite of how many times we fail to succeed with freeing ourselves, that we don't have a bloody clue what we're doing. So I have a couple different ways I'm going to go at this, and I will require you, and at a certain point, I'm going to bring everybody in here, and I don't know, we won't be able to do that, will we, Kate, online? We'll get answers from the crew out there? Okay, but I won't see it. Oh, you'll put it in the chat area. Okay, perfect. Now I'm on board more or less. See, old dogs can do new tricks. At a certain point, I'm going to invite you to participate in the study. And you'll see it'll be quite clear when and why we do that. So let's have a nice deep breath. And let me start with an idea that's going to require you kind of being open to it. So imagine for a moment, in scale and in levels, that there's some constant collapse of all your possibilities, all of them, a constant collapse into a kind of huge, invisible, unseen prison complex. So here I am as a human being, divinely designed to be the expression and reflection of the logos of all there is. And instead of knowing myself that way, I am constantly reduced into a single state, a single thought, a single feeling, a single identity. But I don't know that's happening to me. And the reason I don't I tripped over my own tongue. And the reason I don't know that's happening to me is because in this particular prison, which we're going to call our present level of consciousness, in this particular prison, every day all of the inmates, you and I, are fed a kind of a drug that helps us forget the day before and even where we are up until that moment. And then after we've taken the drug, without knowing it, because we're kind of woozy, we're circulated through a series of differently located and decorated cells in this immense prison complex. And some of the cells are better than others, there's no question about it. But the point being that as I'm circulated through this series of cells, and I've been drugged so that I don't recognize anything about where I am, it never dawns on me that again and again and again, I am being relegated, remanded over into a world where there's no possibilities other than what's in that little cell in that moment. Do you understand the metaphor, the analogy? Now, does that sound even feasible to you? Be honest. Let's see, the man is saying that without knowing it, I am a prisoner of some level of something or other where I'm fed a drug every day. And when I take that drug, I forget that I've been not only circulating around into different cells and cell blocks, but I don't even know that's happening to me. You wouldn't think that was true, would you, honestly? And if it was, wouldn't I know it? Wouldn't I? But not if we couldn't see that the only reason things always look new and different to us is because the jailer of that prison keeps moving us in and out of different selves. Not cells, but selves, identities. And that each time I am put into, willingly, into a particular sense of myself decorated as someone strong or weak, proud, embarrassed, whatever it may be, that each time that happens, it's impossible for me to remember that I've been that self before. Because when I become that self, it is at the cost of all the selves that have come before me. They're just obliterated. This is what the forgetfulness means. The drug means I can't remember that I have been 100 times this person, 1,000 times in this kind of relationship. I have no clue that when I am that person or locked in that relationship, all other possibilities disappear, because the only possibility available to me in that cell of self, or that self-cell, the only thing available to me is the content of whatever that particular consciousness is that shifted me through whatever self it was and brought me to that point where I'm just kind of moving through life, thinking to myself that I'm having a lot of different experiences, failing to see it isn't really a lot of different experiences at all. It's a self that I don't know that keeps telling me what my experience is and then locking me into that experience so that all I know in the midst of it is to like it or not like it. The cell is decorated well or it's not. Still tracking with me? Now just quickly, because I want to not lose you, haven't you ever noticed how you can be sitting someplace and be completely consumed with a certain kind of thought or feeling, and everything is dedicated to figuring out what to do because the walls of that cell are moving in, and then the chicken pot pie or whatever you've got in the oven, the little timer goes off, ding, 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 and you go ding, 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 and everything that you were identified with the moment before, all the things that were so important, out the window they go, because now there's a piece of chocolate available to you. And now you're identified with the pleasure of the chocolate instead of identified with the conflict of those thoughts and feelings you were wrestling with the moment before. Do you understand now what I mean by cell and selves? All right, transition. There'll be quite a few of these. Take a nice deep breath, everybody. Please, at home, give yourself a little shift. It'll help you get some oxygen up to that brain. My identity, our identity in any given moment is inseparable from whatever the character or quality is of whatever reaction I'm having in that moment. My identity, who I am, my sense of self in any given moment cannot be separated from whatever reaction is going through me, so that my relationship to that reaction is, in fact, my identity. Do you understand that? And because I'm always reacting to different conditions, that as conditions change and my reactions go through their gamut, I myself am going through a plethora of different eyes, different identities that appear given the conditions that produce the reaction I have. And so that when I have the reaction, I am in that moment, please, automatically reduced to whatever the corresponding associations are with that reaction. Nothing else gets into my mind, influences me other than whatever the material is that is associated with the reaction and the condition that reaction blames itself on. Yes or no? Yes. So whether I see it or not, my entire sense of self, wanted or not wanted, is in fact determined by these reactions I'm having. They are how I see the world. So these reactions, moving along, they are in that moment, without any shadow of doubt, my interpreter and my guide in that moment. Because my reaction is telling me what you did, what happened. And as it tells me what you did and what happened, then it explains to me why that happened that way, and then what I must do accordingly. And that reaction always brings up a host of questions that it never dawns on me aren't my questions, but that rather those questions belong to whatever identity it is that's looking for some way to save itself or figure out what it is that happened. So it's in constant thought. Still, yes? So much so, meaning my relationship to these reactions as interpreter and guide, that it never occurs to me that I must have had 1 million, conservatively, of these negative reactions And though I don't see it because all I see in one given moment is whatever my mind is pointing to as being the whole of myself, I must have been 10,000 different people over a period of time, so much so that it never ever even occurred to me, well, what is the nature of this negative reaction? I have negative reactions, yes. My identity can't be separated from the way in which I'm brought into that reaction, yes or no? Well, why would it never occur to a person to say, well, instead of the assumption that I know what these reactions are, why wouldn't I ask myself, what is the nature of these reactions that as I give myself over to them becomes a prison for myself? Because I do get caught inside of a prison of reactions, don't I? And the answer for the first part of this talk, the source of every negative reaction, without which there is no painful, lingering negative reaction, is what? Some form of resistance to whatever the moment is in question. Important transition. My sense of self, that though I don't recognize it, I have the experience of finding myself over and over and over again locked down. Yes or no? And that when I'm locked down, I never think to myself, actually, I've been locked down here for like 1 billion years. Why is it with all of the answers that I've come up with, I'm still a prisoner? Prisoner of my past, a prisoner of my appetites, a prisoner of my fear. Why is that all that going on? And the reason is because the reactions, when they appear, bring with them whatever identity corresponds to the consciousness that's having the reaction. So it is a cell unto itself. It is a mind in the darkness that doesn't know it's in the darkness. And by the grace of God, if it weren't for a light that dwells in the darkness, we would never know that's the case. But here's the main point. That negative reaction, every negative reaction, how many of you have repeated negative reactions? That's what we're talking about. No repeated negative reaction exists without some form of resistance. Everybody understand that? Now, do you see that the reaction tells you why you're resisting the moment? But isn't part of the cell the realization that my reactions have told me a gazillion times why it is that I don't want the moment? In fact, I don't even have to think about it. The minute the moment's there I don't want, I know why I don't want it. So that the real culprit, at least at this point in the presentation of the material, the real culprit is that somehow I am in relationship with some kind of resistance that I have never even thought to myself I should examine. Because it doesn't occur to me to examine my instantaneous assumption that what's wrong is out there. My reaction tells me it's out there. Only we're learning, at least at this point, that whatever it is that we blame our resistance on, the moment doesn't produce the resistance. The moment creates a revelation of something in me that is, in fact, always resisting anything it doesn't want. Transition. I say that to you because I always make a little shift. I invite you to do so. We're going to build a list now. And you're going to see how this list corresponds very much with what it is that we've been talking about up to now. I don't know how this works. Can we bring up the list somewhere?
Not the list, but she has.
I mean the heading for the, okay, there it is. That's good. All right, so I'll turn around and read it. Ready? Imagine for just a moment that you stand before the gates of heaven and that prior to being allowed entrance, you are asked the following question by an invisible angelic being. As honestly as you can and in as few words as possible, what would you say is your greatest weakness? What would you say? How would you answer that question? What would you say is your greatest weakness? Now, I get it. sometimes when I'm preparing material and I have to come up with a title for the talk and all the rest of that, I go through an hour worth of trying to figure out how not to ask that question in the title. Because nobody's interested in their weakness. Tell me about my strength. Tell me how beautiful I am and wise and giving and good through and through. That's all I want to hear, and how to get more of the goodness that I already embody. So when I have to talk to a person about weakness or pain, I know going in that it's like selling ice to Eskimos, because we just don't want to know about our weakness. In fact, honestly, if you're honest, most of us would never even say we have a weakness. We would say other people do things that cause us to act against ourselves. And I would never act against myself if it weren't for this particular condition. And the way I know it's this particular condition is that my reaction is telling me that the condition is responsible for this kind of sickening, irritated, gumbo, balled up self that I am in that moment. It can't have anything to do with me, because I'm pretty much perfect. So I get that aside. So let me go through, as I like to do, let me prime the pump a little bit to give you an idea of what I mean by what would you say is your greatest weakness. Now see, this is the problem. Most of us actually don't know most of us have no idea what our weakness is. And the whole point of this talk is to get to a place where I'm going to show you there's only one source of all weakness. One source of all weakness. Now, what would it be worth to you to actually know inwardly and from yourself, so that you could work diligently? What would it be worth to you to know for a fact that there's only one source of all your weakness? Would that be worth something to you? Because don't you see 1,000 different reasons for your weakness? So let me go through this. Here's an example of weakness that, by and large, which is a fascinating point, most of us take these moments of weakness as the proof of our strength. An example of weakness, being defensive. Now, when you're on the defense, do you think to yourself that you're weak? Yes or no? Absolutely not. When I'm defensive, man, I am justified. I know exactly why you are, what you did, how you insult, whatever you did. I'm on the defensive, so it feels like I'm really strong. How then, before we get into this list, how then is being defensive a form of weakness? How is being defensive a form of weakness? Because I don't think I'm weak when I'm defending myself. How is being defensive a form of weakness? Anybody want to venture something quickly? We're not building our list yet, although I can see that we've already started getting some name. Can you, what?
I'm looking outside, not inside.
Well, yeah, she said I'm looking outside instead. No, the reason that defensiveness is a weakness is because A, I have no idea at all what is defending me from you, but more importantly, I've never actually rescued myself by being defensive in my whole life. In fact, second force, the more defensive I am, the more offensive you become. Yes or no? So being defensive does what? It ends the conversation. Doesn't it? No other possibilities exist in the moment of my defensiveness other than me retreating into some particular self, a cell, and in that cell, making sure that nothing and no one gets in or out that doesn't have my approval. So defensiveness is a form of weakness, isn't it? How about wanting approval? Do you ever think to yourself that wanting approval is a form of weakness? And don't you dare say that you do, because if you did, you would stop wanting approval. If you knew that every time you look to someone or something for some kind of approval, some validation, if you knew your children, your grandchildren, your friends, and your family, and it's incessant, I would add, that every time you look to them, whether you know it or not, what you're saying is, please love me, please don't hurt me, please agree that I am worthwhile your time and attention. That is exactly what you're saying. You are begging when you want approval. Now, is begging the act of a man or a woman who has spiritual strength, or is begging like that the proof that I have no idea who I am, let alone what I'm doing as I do what? When I seek approval from people, what happens when people fawn in front of you? We've talked about it 1,000 times. Do you go, oh, you're beautiful, I love you? Or inwardly you're going, yuck. Now, when you go yuck, here's another form of weakness we have no idea is a form of weakness. How many of you are afraid of rejection? All right, so you have some ideas here? Let's go onto the board and into the room. We're asking, what would you say is your greatest weakness? Deb.
Impatience.
Deborah says impatience. And of course, that's a very valid one, isn't it? Now, do I need to show that again? Why is impatience weakness? See, here's the problem. You know the words. Like you sense impatience is weakness, right? But if you actually knew that impatience was weakness, how often would you just throw yourself into an impatient state? So I say what I know, but the truth is I don't know what I say. That's the whole point of this work, is for there to be a marriage between body, mind, and emotion so that I can start to recognize when I say impatience is a form of weakness. Why is it a weakness? Because impatience ensures that nothing else happens other than my demand is met. And if my demand isn't met, then you're the one responsible for my pain. So I'm back again into a state of isolation. Am I not? That's why impatience is a weakness. Here's another reason it's a weakness. What do people experience when you're impatient with them? Pain. And when people experience the pain of your impatience, what is it that then you experience as a result of their pain? More isolation. The weakness goes deeper. All right, onto the board. Let me go quickly here. I'll catch some of you in here. Stratus says, I tell myself, I lie. I lie to myself. That's what he's saying. Not to mention lie to others, but I lie to myself. Now, it's pretty evident, isn't it, why lying to myself, defending myself is a weakness? Is it evident? Do we know for sure? Because if I lie to myself, it means I think I see the truth. Or I so much don't want to see the truth that I'll isolate myself in any particular thought or feeling that lets me get through that moment unscathed, as it were. Mark says, needing others too much. Yes. Heidi, being bossy, a know-it-all. Carl, avoiding challenging situations. Why is avoiding challenging situations a weakness? Why is it?
Because you don't want to see your fear.
It strengthens the assumption that the condition is greater than my ability to learn from it, doesn't it? Paul, I don't know what the heck, that's a link up there. I don't know what that's for. Ignore it. Okay. Obsessing about problems, fears, and desires. Now, fear is obviously a weakness, isn't it? But why is fear a weakness? I'm serious. Why is fear a weakness? Again, fear produces always a binary relationship to the moment. Fear has no choices in it other than fight or flight. That's the whole repertoire of fear, isn't it? So imagine, back to my example of this huge prison complex, that here comes a moment, and all I know to do in that moment is to lock myself into a cell, a self that only knows how to look at that moment from no other possibility than I've got to fight and struggle to control this, or I have to avoid this at all costs. So the weakness in fear is that it isolates me in an order of consciousness that cannot do anything but reincarnate itself through its binary relationship to life. Yes? Let's go into the room. Chris.
Ambition.
I have that down on this list. Ambition. Now, who thinks to themselves that ambition is a weakness? Nobody. Because we're raised in a world where our conditioning is, if you're not ambitious, you're dead meat. So I have to learn not just to be ambitious, but I have to learn, at least to some extent, to hide it. So that I spend my whole life in the pursuit of something, that in the pursuit of it, what's the weakness in ambition? Why is weakness in ambition? Why is ambition a weakness? Anybody? Chrissy, you said it. Do you know why? No, but you know it is.
Fear is behind it. It isolates you. You have to be superior.
There's no ambition in this world without fear of being no one. That somehow or other, if I don't acquire, achieve, get to the top of the hill, be seen as someone special, then I'm nothing. That's the nature of ambition. That's different than the love of something. Terry.
Judging others.
That's a big one on the list. Judging others. Now, why is judging a weakness? Even Christ spoke about it. Why is judging a weakness? Because it veils that in that moment, whatever it is that's in me that's judging that person obviously feels superior to them, so that my sense of superiority doesn't exist without that which I despise. My sense of self, my sense of superiority does not exist without something that looks out and sees something unworthy as being as good as I. Codependency, of course, being Namita, being a self-appointed savior. Who can tell me why being a self-appointed savior is a form of weakness? Ready? Because you crucify yourself every day for nothing. Susie, fear that I'm not enough. Of course, that's a big one. Tony, when I really don't care anymore regarding others' negativity, I get the sense that no one really cares about me either. So it's best to exercise the same Buddhist detachment. Tony. Where is the weakness that is implied when suddenly I tell myself I just don't care anymore? Where's the weakness in that?
I don't want to get hurt.
Why do I have to tell myself at all I don't care? In order to convince myself. Do you understand? Any more in the room, and then we're going to go on. Roger.
Self-pity.
Self-pity, big one. Self-pity. Why is self-pity a weakness? Anybody? Why is self-pity a weakness? Well, I hope that you will take a meeting like this and start to realize, you know what? I know so much and I know nothing. Why is here I am, I'm full of self-pity. Why is that a weakness? Because all there is in that moment is me, poor me, and the world that doesn't acknowledge or recognize my special nature, and which, by the way, is where ambition comes from. Self-pity and ambition are just flip sides of the same coin. But the real weakness is that all of that activity does nothing except promote a grand misunderstanding. Let me go on. We could do more, but this is plenty. Everybody can see that we all share a lot of these same weaknesses that we've been asked at the gate to expound upon. These states that we just described, ready? Are not the weakness itself. What we just described as weakness is not the weakness itself. Rather, they are the negative effect of an unseen weakness. All of these negative states that we just said, this weakness that we confess to participating in, are not the weakness. They are a manifestation of an order of consciousness that gives rise to those weaknesses. See, when you have a weakness, like nobody said an addiction, but an addiction is certainly a weakness, isn't it? When I have an addiction and I hate myself and I struggle all the time not to be like that, not do that, I actually believe that the strength of my struggle with my addiction proves somehow or other that I want to overcome the addiction, doesn't it? Because that's all I know to do is to struggle with it. But the reason that the struggle to overcome addiction has never produced the end of that addiction, and even if someone wins temporary respite, which we do from time to time. You can have one of these weaknesses and vow with every bone in your body, I'm not going to be like that, I'm not going to do it. And you might win some respite from that particular order of yourself. But it does nothing to change the consciousness that is responsible for the effect that you are taking as the cause. Your addiction is not the cause of a weakness. It is an expression of something that you've yet to understand that is producing that relationship with weakness inside of you. Because this is what we're looking at. A relationship with weakness that we don't know we have. Are we tracking, everybody? Can I separate this weakness, which we see in the form of all these negative reactions, can I separate that weakness from the appearance of some unwanted moment in life that I am instantaneously ready to blame? Blame is certainly a form of weakness, isn't it? And yet how many times do I instantaneously find blame? So how can I sit here and agree that all of these things are a form of weakness, and then at the same time, on the other hand, lend myself instantaneously into a relationship with them? It means that I don't, as I've been trying to say, I don't yet understand the real nature of this weakness, because if I understood the nature of the weakness, would I agree to go along with what makes me weaker? Would I? No, if you can see it, the iteration of every one of these weaknesses that we outlined does what? It strengthens the unconscious relationship I have with myself that gives rise to these reactions. Yes? Now, we have learned enough. Transition. Where's my clock? We have learned enough, I trust, to know that here are these moments, and I have instantaneously this blame for it. I have instantaneous resistance to it. But we've learned enough to realize that whatever that moment is, that the nature of any real moment is always new and creative in its basis. No moment repeats itself. We've learned that. Well, if no moment is capable of repeating itself, then how can there be a repeating resistance to a moment? It's not a trick question. I'll rephrase it for you. No moment repeats itself. Yes or no? Always new, always producing the completion of whatever is being acted on, heaven and earth, all that business. No moment repeats itself. And yet, my life is an endless repetition of resistance and the ensuing negative reactions. Yes? Well, how do I explain that to myself? No moment repeats itself, and yet I have instantaneous resistance toward any moment that I don't want. What in the name of heaven does that indicate? A, it's not the moment. That's a good comment. And B, whatever it is in me that's resisting it doesn't exist apart from the condition it resists. Listen to this little summary. Our real weakness in these troubled moments is we don't yet realize there is something unseen in our own consciousness that colors and then blames these moments as being dark and dangerous. The condition, the moment itself, cannot be dark and dangerous to me. It has never taken place before. And if it's never taken place before, which it hasn't, then how can I summarily resist it unless something in me says, I know what this moment is? So what am I really resisting in that moment? Where is the real weakness in that moment? Anybody? We're getting close. Take a nice deep breath because this is critical. What is the birthplace? Where is the birthplace of this resistance and all of the host of dark states that come with it? Where is the birthplace of this resistance? Assuming you follow me, the condition can't produce the painful resistance and negative reactions. If the condition doesn't produce it, then evidently there's something hidden in this consciousness that is responsible for that resistance in every shape and form that it comes up? What is it in this consciousness that is responsible for this seamless resistance to any moment that seems to threaten it? And the answer is this: identification. Identification. Identification is weakness. Identification is weakness. Now let's see if we can prove that. Not because I'm asking you to see it as true, but can you see the truth of the following? From where comes every single negative state, including the sense of hating someone or some group or some national, including all of that, where comes that negative state? From where does it come? Identification. There is no negativity towards another human being without identification. There is no negativity towards any place or person in the whole world without identification. Now, why is that true? Because I am identified with my culture. I am identified with my beliefs, with my God, with my opinion, with my family, with my certainty based on all of the education I've had. So I can never, ever be set against anything in this world without something in me prior to the moment of that relationship meeting it already fully identified with a pre-existing body of knowledge of some kind. That then when that body, this deadness inside of us, this knowledge, that when it meets something that challenges it, it comes to life. And that's what we call strength, is the resurrection of a momentary dead part of this consciousness that doesn't exist until something is seen challenging it, and then by God it is there and it's going to war. Not in the broadest sense of it, but certainly in every possible individual sense that then becomes collectively the war that we see raging all over this world since time began. This is a difficult topic for most of us. But if we look at it and start to understand, when do I get upset? When am I angry? When am I anxious? When am I blaming others? Because if you have said, as you've said, is true, that all of these states are a form of weakness, what in the name of God elicits out of me a weakness that while it's busy coming up inside of me, I take as strength? Do you not have strong opinions about people that bother you? Does it ever occur to you to think to yourself, well, I wonder where it is that this list that I keep of what's wrong with people, this instantaneous, painful experience of thinking about someone. How in the name of God can thinking about someone produce pain in you? It does, doesn't it? And the way that it can be answered is that when I think about someone and it brings up pain in me, is because the identification I have with them being who they are, not like me, I'm instantaneously thrown in that cell of self in which all of the convenient answers for why that person is the way they are just waiting for me there. So I don't have to think about this. Something's wrong with you. It's extraordinary if you can see it with me. Identification is the weakness. Now, what would that mean to me? Hold on. I wake up in the morning. What gets me out of bed? Look at my face. What gets me out of bed? Pat said food. What gets me out of bed? A want or a not want? Yes or no? A desire gets me out of bed. Now, how does a desire get me out of bed? Oh, because I'm identified with it. So my sense of self, when I open my eyes, is automatically predetermined for me by whatever particular thought or feeling is going through my mind when my eyes open. But I'm so used to identifying with whatever it is that my mind has projected as essential in that moment that it never dawns to me that when I go to get whatever it is that my mind has said is essential to my well-being and it's not there, it never dawns on me. The pain of that moment isn't because what I wanted isn't there, but because I've insisted without knowing it that it be there the way I want it when I want it. Isn't that the very definition of impatience? If you're lucky, you can sit at home at some point in the day. But if you look at yourself, what is your mind always doing? It's always finding something to be identified with. That's what it does. That's all it does. With God as my witness, the entirety of our identity is based on an identification with some condition that has moved a reaction inside of us that has come to the forefront and designed and developed the whole of the next minute or lifetime for us, just like that. Is there another life? Is there a way for me not to be the incessant instrument of a weakness that only exists because there's a demand that has come up and I've identified with it and thrust me into this particular little niche of thought? So that then the whole of my life depends on answering this little tiny niche thing, little tiny thought, little feeling, one little demand. The whole of my life, I'm consumed by it, am I not? I'm touching something quite deep. God help me, who am I without what I'm identified with? What am I without something to be identified with? Do you see that's all we know? Can you stretch yourself enough to, that's all I know. That's what my mind does. It's always measuring this and looking at that, figuring how to get this right, get them the way they need to be, get everything lined up so I can be fine. Everything about my whole life is predetermined by an unconscious nature that must find something to identify with so that it can have a sense of self. And I call its sense of self me. One day, with God as my witness, if you work, you will be privileged, graced enough to start recognizing, I spent the whole day identified with going from one prison cell to another prison cell and never knowing that I was inside of a prison. Now remember I said it's difficult to sell ice to Eskimos. Who in the name of God wants to know the truth of themselves? I find solace, consolation in every particular I that comes up given any circumstance because it's so familiar to me. It just runs along seamlessly, whether I hate or love, want or not want. It's all seamless, except that there's never a me who sees that these seemingly seamless states are in fact these disparate and disconnected dots that are moved from time to time, place to place by the prevailing condition, so that my very identity becomes conditional, dependent upon conditions. The whole of myself dependent that way. That's what weakness is. That's what weakness is. Weakness, for all intents and purposes, can be said in two ways. Real weakness is having no idea who I am. And because I don't know who I am, the weakness is I'm willing to accept anything that I'm given to be myself. Only to find out too late that now I'm in a position where I have to protect that or punish those who've interfered with it. There is no such thing as attachment, dependency, fear. There's none of those things that do not, at some level, that are not somehow or other born out of this identification. And where does the identification Are we all at least seeing this much, getting close to end? If that's true, where has this consciousness been hiding all this time? There's no scripture, east or west, that doesn't say, wake up, man. Don't go to sleep. Every last one. Well, where have I gone to sleep that I don't know it? What puts me to sleep? I'm trying to tie this together for you. What puts me to sleep? Anybody want to guess? My reactions. Because there's no reaction that doesn't come up that I don't know why. And the instant that I know why that reaction is there, I'm in the cell of that consciousness that has and is responsible for that reaction. But the reaction belongs to what? We've been talking about the whole time. Belongs to this consciousness that doesn't know itself outside of what it's identified with. You know that passage, I use it quite often because I think it's so powerful and important. You can't serve two masters, for you will love one and despise the other. I'm showing you why what Christ was saying is true. If I love this master, I'm identified with that master. With whatever that desire is, I'm identified with it. And the minute I'm identified with that master, that desire, I hate anything that interferes with that desire. My identification with that makes me feel like anything that isn't part of that is a threat. So it makes no difference what it is that one says they love or hate. It's still an expression of a bifurcated mind that is forever finding its identity in one thing or another and in its identification with whatever it may be. And then that's the other thing that's amazing. Do you know that how many of you ever feel hatred or anger? You know, you watch the news now, it's enough to make you want to take your own life. You watch the news, I don't care left, right, up, down, that's bull. How can I not see that my identity in that moment is nothing but rage or fear? And that the purpose of what I'm looking at, the whole of that broadcast, is to stimulate some strong sense of myself so that I can keep going back to that same left or right leaning, whatever that group may be, because it's going to strengthen my weakness. And blindness is weakness when all is said and done. Isn't that, when everything is said and done, looking at all we've talked about for the last 51 minutes, isn't blindness the weakness? Now your eyes have been opened. You must begin to understand the need, which is the purpose of these talks. I'll say it personally. I need to free my mind. I need to free my mind. My mind isn't free. It's not mine. I need to free my mind, but until I know that my mind isn't free, it doesn't even dawn on me as that which I must take with me everywhere I go, in every moment. Because is my mind free if it's suddenly shackled by a reaction of some kind? Is it? No, it is not. Because my identity is inseparable from my reaction, and when my identity can't be separated from my reaction, I'm in that self, in that cell, where the content of the associations connected to that reaction validate everything about me and how I know I'm right or wrong. It makes no difference either way. The first freedom, believe it or not, the first freedom is to be able to see where and how I've been made a prisoner of my own unwitting tendency to identify with my own reactions. That's the first freedom. Because until I'm free to see that these reactions belong to a consciousness that is there way before the condition produces the resistance, till I'm free to see that, I am in that prison being moved from cell to self to cell. Am I not? You know, the spiritual, the true path is such a paradox. it's enough to drive you crazy, and you don't have far to go, so you'll get there soon. Because if that's true, that the first thing for me to do is to free my mind, that means that I must never lose sight of this complicity that I have with every given moment to remand myself over to that thought or that feeling, to those reactions. Because that's what happens. It is seamless, isn't it? So where do I begin if I want to free my mind? And now you understand what we're talking about. I must free my mind. I must free myself from the self that this present mind makes endlessly, which, by the way, it's been making the same mind since the fall. Knowledge of good and evil. Where do I begin? Where do I begin? Well, obviously I have to begin at the beginning. And where is the beginning all the time? Wherever I am and whatever I'm going through. And there is no moment, essentially, where there is not some form of resistance to something. As much as we do you not try to isolate yourself if you could? You just go put yourself someplace on a large banana-shaped island and eat ice cream or drink or whatever you do. So you just get away from everything that irritates me. Why am I such an irritated person? Are you irritated? Is this talk irritating you? I wrote these words down when I was thinking about this material. The shock of light. That sudden flash of awareness that we are presently so quick to discount because it interferes with what we're identified with. Imagine something that meets a moment where you are given a glimpse of the fact that you have no identity of your own save for whatever it is that has captured your attention, that your attention is the unwitting instrument of something that puts it on something so a derivative sense of self can be taken from it. That in those moments where you see something like that, that's the shock of light. Because if we understand it, you know how you go into it, like I go to bed at night, I get into my bed and I always do a little exercise laying there, which is there's a fan overhead in my bedroom, you know, one of those ceiling fans, thank you. And when I get into bed at night, especially as my peepers get older, for the first few minutes I can't see much of anything, it's just dark. But I know that if I sit there in the dark and wait, that my eyes will gradually accumulate enough light that's ambient in the room so that they can open up and start to see what was there, but that they couldn't see because of the darkness I was temporarily in. This is much the same thing when it comes to your spiritual work. That's why I said to you, one of the most difficult things is to have patience with your pain. You have to have patience with the part of yourself that cannot wait to glom onto something that gives it a very established, firm sense of self. So that when the moment comes you don't want, and up comes this reaction, to enter into the darkness of that consciousness. You are created to be able to enter into that darkness. And more accurately, the truth is that that darkness is something you're already in. You're not really entering into it. You're just for the first time, by the shock of that light, being made aware of the fact that I am at all points in time surrounded, essentially immersed in a consciousness that knows nothing about itself at all. Nothing. And that shock, that first shock is it's extraordinary. Everything about me wants to find something to think about that it knows and that it can resist or hope for. That's all it cares about. People, places, money, power, possessions. That's it. Just something for me to think about. You will one day have the shock of seeing that's true. And the beautiful thing about the shock of that light is that it proves at once that my whole identity is an illusion. That's why Christ said you must lose your life to find it. The whole identity is an illusion. Everything that you think you are, it's a canard, a rumor, a lie, a fake. Now, see, I waited all 52 minutes to get to that. Can you see why? Because I'll show you a fake. I'll show you. And then you see it, because now in the light of that moment, you begin to understand, for the fact that there is a light that can show you that you are not who you imagine yourself to be, proves there's another order of self that can see all of that, and by the way, never be bothered by it. Quite the opposite. Although for a while you may have to go through the necessary panic attacks. All the things that accompany a real student as he or she begins to see certain things that the whole of this world, since its inception, is dedicated to keeping you from seeing. And no one will know. But every time that you take the shock of that light and enter into the awareness of that moment, that at once proves, my God, is this it? Just the next thing? My next worry? My next greed? My next anger? My next enemy? My next visit to the past? My next hatred of myself? Is that all there is? Because when you start to see that that is all that has been, you'll see the prison. And the prison isn't a place out there. It is an unconscious relationship with an unconscious mind that can be shattered just like that. Not all at once. Just like the light doesn't reveal what's in the darkness all at once, even though it is there all at once. You will gradually be given the eyes and the understanding, and more importantly, the wish to go deeper and deeper into this understanding so that you can free yourself from what you don't yet know about yourself. Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue.
and thanks to our online audience for bearing with us. I did get an update that GoToWebinar is back up and running. Too much to try and move over to that platform at the moment, though, so we'll have it for next time. But we are about to start our open Q&A dialogue, so everyone in the room, you can participate, and if you would please, since we won't have anyone being able to call in and talk with Guy, if you can, come up here and share. And then for you online, you actually can send me a note or a question in the chat area of either Facebook or YouTube, and I'll just come up and read it to Guy when I see those come in. I think before we get started with that, I just have one other announcement. If you're new here and you're not familiar with our work, Life of Learning Foundation is a nonprofit organization founded by Guy. We are here in Southern Oregon, been here for many years, and our mission is to get these kinds of helpful and healing ideas that he spoke of tonight out into the world as far and wide as we possibly can. So we appreciate any support that you may be able to give. We certainly appreciate donations, and those of you who have donated to us in the past, thank you very much for doing so. And if you would like to do that tonight, you could go to guyfinley.org/donate, and you'll see there a page that shows you how you can do a one-time donation or a monthly donation. And if you haven't explored our website, just guyfinley.org, go and poke around, and you'll see there's just tons and tons of such helpful information on there, and a big database, a wisdom school, basically, of so much content, and you can search on anything and find information right away on any topic you're interested in. So encourage you to do that. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to run until 7:30 p.m. Pacific tonight, so we have about 20 minutes or so, and I know Patricia wants to come up and say something, and then go ahead and join us when you can.
While Pat's coming up, I would add that Saturday on Insight Timer, which I suspect most people get some notification about, I don't know, I'm going to explore a little bit more deeply some of this topic of this evening and talk about a particular undeveloped feature of our present consciousness that without its development, there's no real chance to have the shock of that light, let alone the healing that comes with it, that makes it possible for us to see these things, that opens our eyes, that gives us eyes to see. Most of us don't understand the idea of eyes to see or ears to hear, because when you're always reacting and identifying with something you're resisting, you only have eyes and ears for tears and fears. Huh? Wow, just comes natural. Pat, you're up.
My name is Patricia. This was a perfect talk for me to hear tonight. When I was getting ready to come for the talk tonight, I really saw, over the years, you always see your mind bringing up the same old stuff, people that you don't like or people that did something to you or whatever. So it was doing this about a person that used to come here that was very annoying. And, but I saw something so different. I kept trying to drop it, and it kept coming up over and over and over. And I saw that it was almost like, because the same things come up all the time, right?
Right.
It was kind of just trying to keep it in place. Like, it kept having to come up every once in a while, so I would be identified with that forever. And I also saw it was getting me sick.
Yes.
And I never saw that before, that it was actually not only draining me, but making me feel physically sick. And I was grateful to feel that, because it makes makes you stronger not to want that. I don't know how to say it.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I'll remind you of the key lesson for tonight, which I hope will make more sense to you. Much as a stalking tiger uses woodland shadows to hide its intention from its intended prey, so does our weakness hide behind the momentary strength of any negative reaction we become identified with, even as it consumes us.
And not only that, but it's like it's trying to keep it crystallized in a,
It is crystallizing that
It's already
consciousness.
crystallized.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's why the old desert fathers used to always talk about the fact that as a person awakens, it's not a pleasure party, because things that have been crystallized in us, certain eyes that are inseparable from a constant form of resistance that accompanies them in every moment, that challenges that eye, that has to be dissolved. And there's only one thing that can dissolve that identity-making consciousness, is the awareness of it, and that does not go gently into the good night, any more than Pharaoh was willing to let the Jews leave the land of darkness. Kate's at the microphone.
I'm just going to read a question that came in this was from Mary from our last class. We had it left over, so I want to throw it in here. I just texted it to you, Guy.
Okay.
So Mary says, sometimes when in the flow, it seems a distraction occurs, usually in the form of a disturbance, which is a distraction of the flow. One thought leading to the next, and the flow is disrupted. And this seems like a form of self-sabotage, but I'm so sure that it is not my self-sabotage, but more so that of a negative lower consciousness. Is this something the lower consciousness tends to do? That is, it wants to stop the flow and our being free of identifications and allowing the light to move freely within us and functioning in an enlightened way?
Oh, I hope that you were able to listen to the talk tonight, Mary, because I answered this completely. But I'll add one last thought to it. Nothing exists in creation that doesn't resist the creative act. Nothing exists in creation that doesn't resist what acts upon it. Nothing. But when that creature reacts to what acts upon it and resists psychologically, becoming involved in the denial of what is acting on it, then that creature continues its life at the expense of the developing soul intended to be fed through that resistance and relationship of reconciliation. I hope that you can understand that. John, what do you got? Oh, come on up. Sure, John. It's a pretty free-rolling night. Keep up your work, Mary. Your suspicion is true.
Hello, my name is John. So, when you go to the doctor and you sit on the little chair, not a chair, you know what I'm talking about, whatever that thing's called.
Edge of a table.
Yeah. And he hits your knee with the hammer, and you can't help but, if your reflexes are healthy, you can't help but make your leg kick. It's not even you doing it, right? It's in there, and you can't stop it. Even if you wanted to, you can't stop it. So I go to work, and I've got the intention, I want to not be a whiny so-and-so. I've got the intention, I don't want to make people go into pain just from my presence, the look on my face. I don't want to be a jerk at work. That's the intention. And I really want, that's what I'm going in there with, And then if this person says this or that condition happens,
hammer time.
it's hammer. And you can't stop it.
I can't stop this.
You can't. It's preloaded in here. It's ready. It's spring loaded. And so that's just another reason why it's pointless to judge yourself, because it's not you. If you had your druthers, you wouldn't do that, and you really wouldn't. You don't want to be like that. So that was part of it. I was in a negative state this morning, and intellectually I knew that I'm looking in the wrong direction from what we learn here. And I didn't want to resist the resistance that was going on. At least I can choose to do that much. And so just by virtue of the fact that you have that choice and you try to make that, even though you know it's not going to stop the resistance that's going on. You always have that choice. And just that much is at least a degree of separation from it, so you know this is not me. It's definitely in me, but it's definitely not me. And I can see it in that moment.
So just to clarify this idea, you coming up, and it's an incredibly important one. Here's a man, and his private plane has crashed somewhere in the great desert outback of Australia. Gazillion miles in every direction, nothing but kangaroos, scorpions, and rocks. Now, when his light plane crashed, he was on his way as a gem collector to sell a host of gems that he had to some market somewhere in Brisbane. Opals. Well, there's a show, I enjoy it, opal something or other. It's just a bunch of guys in the outback there digging for opals. It's unbelievable what they go through, the privation. Anyway, so there he is. And he's got this sack of opals, weighs 40 pounds. Now he starts out, I can't leave the opals here. Some kangaroos will steal them. So I got to take him with me. And he starts walking, and he gets to a certain point where by the grace of God, he stumbles on a small pool. Does he have to choose what to do with those opals? Or is his awareness situationally that which chooses for him that he must give up the opals at this point and fill his bag with water, or he's not going to survive? So is he making a choice, or does awareness make it clear what must be done for him in that moment? If anything, he doesn't want to do what awareness makes evident. Do you see that? That is exactly the same thing, John, when it comes to this that we're talking about. It isn't, you have this mistaken idea that's the whole point. You see, you have this mistaken idea that there's someone there by your name who can choose something. You can't choose. You can't choose because no one's there other than whoever it is that appeared in that moment, caught up in the conditions that have created that consciousness. There's no one there to choose. I know this drives you mad. I remember the first time I heard anything like that, I wanted to pull my hair out. Yes, I can. I choose all the time. No, I'm being chewed up all the time. And I have no awareness of it at all. And all of my choices are to avoid the jaws of an unconscious nature that consumes itself, hiding behind the reactions that it identifies with. You need to see this, because as you do, you won't go in there trying to, you'll go in wanting to be aware, John, not to make, how to say it, my choice is to be aware, not to try to make the right choice. Because if I'll be aware, the choice is in it. And then if I fail to take the side of what awareness shows me, then at least now I'm like St. Paul. I don't do the good I would, I do the evil I wouldn't, but I see it now. And then it would double down on my own wish to be attentive. Capiche? That's an Australian word.
Hi, my name is Leah. So kind of adding into that there's no one there to make a choice. You mentioned crystallization.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it's seamless.
Yep.
These reactions are seamless. So all of those things show that we don't choose. But often you talk, and I'm hoping you'll comment on working in the opposites.
Yeah.
Where does working in the opposites, like intentionally working in the opposites, fit into that picture? Thank you.
Did she get an award of some kind just now?
No, I'm thanking you
Okay, I see. There is a very deep answer to the question. John goes into work, and he's already had a fit at home. And he's saying to himself, I don't want to walk into this place and be, a bummer, a downer. I don't want to be, broadcasting my negativity, so I'm going to try to choose to be awake and aware of myself and not express that. So is that a right idea? Absolutely. But where it becomes a wrong idea is when I want to identify as being someone who isn't going to do this or that. The choice is always the same choice in every moment. No matter what it is, it's always the same choice. Can I observe myself? Can I be a witness? That's always the right choice in every moment. You never go wrong there because it is always inviting the shock of this light. Now, do what I don't want to do, work in the opposites. Why do that? Because if I understand a tendency, then in understanding the tendency, I know that the tendency is not going to come out and say, hey, John, here's your tendency. It hides. It hides in the reaction. So knowing its tendency is to hide, I'm going to do everything I can to bring it out into the light. And I want to bring it out into the light so I can learn something more about the tendency that doesn't want to be seen. So it's a form of cooperating with the light that dwells in the darkness, so that in cooperating with that light, with my wish, and on Sunday I think I'm going to talk about a certain kind of prayer. As I work to do that, lo and behold, I am exposed, and I don't want to use those words, in that moment, what has been invisible is exposed within me. And when it is exposed within me, then I can see quite clearly that that which I'm aware of now, I wasn't aware of before, and more importantly, I really see the need to be aware of this. So it strengthens my wish to work in what we call the opposites. And there's so much more than that, Leah. The whole of the December talks, to be in the world but not of it, are going to focus on this idea of why it is wise to do what you don't want to do, of what it means to work in the opposites. Because there is an entire invisible, when we have talks like this, you are made aware, are you not, to some extent, that there is a world that you have been in but that you cannot see at all, yes or no? Now, imagine for a split second that what that tiny little glimpse that you have is like looking at the universe through a pinhole, so that all you see is one little speck with a few little lights in it, but that you can start to understand the whole thing is beyond the comprehension of the eye that wants to comprehend it. Because I want to comprehend things so I have control. And that there's a celestial, a trinity, a relationship of forces that are essential and pivotal to not just the beginning of creation, but its continuation. And that you as a man or a woman have and have been given the gift of becoming aware of this invisible trinity, of this invisible makeup of what is essentially the creation of yourself moment to moment. You actually have access to that. But it's all by little shocks of light. And then what you do when you get those shocks.
We actually have a question that came in from Namita that will go along, I think it'll go along with this.
Sure. Love to talk to Namita.
All right, I just sent it to you. Can we just remain in the state of generalized attention, both watching and listening to sounds, but not making meanings out of it in the mind? Is that enough? This is with regard to day-to-day situations.
There are so many ways for me to answer this, Namita. First of all, let me be quite clear that what we call generalized attention is not to be a zombie. Struggling somehow or other. The struggle not to be taken over is you having been taken over by an identity that wants to know itself as spiritual. To that I would add that there's nothing more valuable than a living meditation. You know, you all, whoever you are, wherever you are, your life right now is an expression of your karma. It is an action that is ceaselessly unfolding within you and through you and upon you, that cannot be separated from all the choices that you have made to this point in time. And all of the choices that you have made up at this point in time, you didn't make. And as you start to see the cost of trying to keep in place the choices that you didn't make and the identity connected to them, it will begin to dawn on you, maybe there's something more valuable to do with my time than to ensure that my identity goes on as I've imagined it. That my powers, my possessions, my places, all the stuff, that maybe there's something more valuable to do. Now, some of us, for whatever reason, that starts really young. But for some of us, it doesn't happen until we're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. And it doesn't matter when it starts. Because what matters in that moment is that you are being, by the shock of light, given an invitation to change what you value, so that during the day, instead of giving yourself over to everything in the pursuit of validating yourself as you imagine yourself, you begin to want to have something validate you that can't be thought about. You seek a relationship with the divine. And the divine exists in every moment, in every cell, in every atom, in every micro, macrocosm, every last one constantly rolling through you. And at some point you will understand meditation is a living relationship with the living moment. That's what meditation is. There's no other meditation. And as you understand the living meditation with the living moment, you don't need, you might, I like to close my eyes sometimes. You don't need to do anything other except realize, I want to be here. I don't want my identity to come and go like some errant bug that found some sugar on the floor someplace. I want a real life. And my life isn't real as long as its reality is determined by anything and everyone says and done. The conditions control. To be in the world but not of it is not to be controlled anymore by your demands on the world, but instead to see how the demands you have identified with never were intended to control you, and that every last one of them can be turned into something that delivers you from that illusion of self instead of strengthening it. Is there more?
Leftover questions, but we're at 7.
No, let's go home. It's 7:30. It's been a big night. Plus, we have a meeting afterwards.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for joining us. The replay for tonight will not go up on our GoToWebinar channel, but it will be instantly available on both Facebook and YouTube. So on Facebook, you can just look in our feed, and on YouTube, look under the Live tab, and you'll find it there. And join us again on Friday for our student study group, where we'll be looking at Guy's talk from Sunday. And GoToWebinar should be functioning fine by that point. Fingers crossed, so you'll get your reminder email per the usual. And then join us again, just for our usual classes on Saturday and Sunday. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us. I think that's it for tonight, so thanks everyone.